Oh, so what's up, Jacob?
Nothing much. What's up?
We're doing Day for Night, 1973 Francois Truffaut film.
To
A little,
celebrate, kickstart the Halloween season.
yeah, leave it to this channel to do almost nothing but put slasher movies since November, and then when spooky season comes along, it's Truffaut time, baby.
Time, time to ask if women are magic.
You know what
It's
time it is. Oh my God! But we're doing Day for Night, so let me do a little preamble. Um, so I have, if you've been watching this channel, Jacob's been involved in a lot of these videos as well. We've been hyper focusing on like postmodern teen and slasher movies from the late 90s and early 2000s. And I finally finished that. I decided I was done, that I've completed the work. I finished Dawson's Creek. I finished like fucking 12 videos about it. I finished the show, and I sat back and went, okay, you've made your statement. You can't, that's it. That's all you can possibly say. You've made your statement. Let's try to re-enter the art house. And I knew in my head that what a year of studying nothing but like hip and trendy postmodernism does to you. It makes you like pretty not cynical, but um like I wasn't not giving.
mistrustful.
Yeah, I don't trust auteurs. I don't trust filmmakers. I don't trust film as an industry or as an art form, or at least I didn't. I claimed it was dead, studying like the postmodern movies at least had the security of like being in on that self-criticism. And it was easier to engage with postmodern materials more that way. So when I wanted to re-enter the art house, I didn't want to go for, because there are plenty of great postmodern directors out there. But I wanted to go for, like, if I'm going to get back into cinema, I want to get back into like that sentimental feeling for cinema, or else there's no point. If I'm going to get back into cinema to tell you guys that like film is evil and like film sucks and we shouldn't watch film, then what's the point of it? I want to get back into that feeling of actually like loving these movies. And Truffaut came immediately to mind, and then Day for Night came immediately to mind because Truffaut should, of course, come to mind because he's one of the most famous cinephile turned directors. Like you can feel the love for cinema in every movie. And Day for Night is clearly a film about making a movie. I think it's a movie that's pretty similar to the Soft Skin that Truffaut made before. So like it's also like it's meta, and it has all these like I'm gonna pull a Jacob because I mean I think this is like a pretty I think it's French sentimentalism at its best, and I'm trying. I was looking for a defense of cinema, is what I'm saying, but there are postmodern
Yeah.
flourishes here. But like I'm gonna pull a Jacob and say that was just the time. Like you can't have come up in the French New Wave and not have developed certain attitudes about how to tell like a mini narrative. Um, because there's nothing of postmodern thought to Truffaut. It's sentimentalism, and I wanted a defense of cinema, and I got it from Day for Night. I've watched this movie like 3 times in 2 days because it's not exhausting. It's it's a really nice farce. It's like pretty funny. There are beautiful people in it, and I think it's beautifully directed. And I think it's a pretty great defense of cinema. And I don't think it's an honest defense of cinema because I don't think that cinema can be fully honest. But I think Truffaut knows that and is in love with both, in love with the lie and the truth of it. I don't know. You talk about something because now
Yeah.
I'm losing myself.
No. I actually agree with that reading. I was thinking while watching this that this is like the anti-Scream too.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like Truffaut lives in a fantasy world where the most important movie ever made wasn't a rallying cry for the Ku Klux Klan, and he's like, no, that didn't happen. What are you talking about? You
Yeah.
know, he one of my best friends once said that Truffaut is like the easy to like because he's like the child in all of us. Like
Mm-hmm.
he still kind of views movies like a 12-year-old.
He does.
Um and like, but I agree with you that I think he's kind of knowingly doing that. It's hard to say. And I almost
I,
don't care if he knows or not, because I said
I
like
think
I'm
it's
kind
like
of,
directly in the title of Day for Night, and we're
oh
watching this
yeah,
like,
yeah,
uh, you know, film is obviously not just a filter for reality, but the melodrama that of the content of the film they're actually making has nothing to do and everything to do with like the conduct of the people who are making it, because
yeah, I agree.
sometimes they're very sentimental behind the screen and sometimes they're not. And I find it really fascinating that this film starts, I think, knowingly with Truffaut. Um, like there's like you hear the orchestra starting up for the score,
Yeah,
and
it's like
someone
a
says,
overture. Yeah,
yeah, someone says, don't be sentimental, just play the notes. And I think
yeah,
Truffaut is like, that's an impossibility. And in fact, I think that's a betrayal of film. And
yeah.
I would agree with Truffaut at the end of the day.
No, I agree. I agree. It's odd. It's really disorienting. Because he's like simultaneously super over sentimental, but also in on the kind of limits of that kind of viewpoint for his own art.
Yeah, he's sentimental, but like I like that you just said he's like the child in all of us because he has that sociopathic, like selfish child brain, but like he doesn't view it that way. Remember when Alexander, like an actor on this film, dies? And
Yeah, yeah,
immediately Francois Truffaut is like driving around in circles in a set going like, my worst fear has happened. An actor has died in one of my films that I'm
yeah,
making. Not that like a human being's dead, mind you, but it's still
yeah,
sentimental to the industry itself. And but it's not like it doesn't really value the human loss at
yeah,
all.
yeah.
Uh, which is fascinating. The
If
thing where it
anything,
gets like
this is like, or go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna just like kind of branch that off to uh, the thing that gets Truffaut into trouble is that it's also a defense of the studio system of filmmaking.
Yeah,
That I think it's like pretty well, I mean, I don't have to think it deliberate states it, not just like visually, but I think Truffaut says it that that the studio filmmaking days are done. Now they're gonna make films on streets with like no scripts and no actors, no directors.
hmm,
It's all gonna be shit. Because every time he has those dreams of being a child and finding that Orson Welles thing, the very next thing you see from the gate that is like guarding the Orson Welles stills is the gate of the studio. Like he's these
yeah.
directors. It's not like a juxtaposition. It's a marriage. It's a direct correlation between those two things. I
I,
don't
I
know.
think I think it also makes sense because because obviously he was one of the proponents of auteur theory in France back in the day, and for him a lot of that wasn't just movies have like an art, there's an artist behind a film, but specifically it was about like the limits of the artistic voice within a studio context, which is why he admired Hitchcock so much, because Hitchcock was a studio director who had to like follow studio mandates, and it was about like what aspects of him as a person and as a singular artist kind of broke through those limits. So I think he sees, and I think he felt the same way about like Howard Hawks and the like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not Howard Hawks, but like, you know what I mean? Like
No,
John
it
Ford.
was Howard. Yeah.
And so he kind of admired the I don't know if I'd call it romance, but maybe the romance, or at least the kind of dignity in that of like an artist breaking through the limits of, those restrictions. And so I'm not sure how much he actually believes in like a kind of cinema outside that. And when did this come out? 70?
73, 73.
So yeah, so at this point, well, as we all know, Godard was like,
Mm-hmm.
literally doing the exact opposite of this. He had started
Yeah.
like his Ziga Vertov thing, and so he was no longer
Yeah.
doing like studio productions. He was
And that was almost when you said that like film is gone and dead. I don't know what media we're doing now, but
yeah. I don't know if he full on like disavowed his early work like Breathless, Pierre Lefaux, and so on and so forth, but he definitely like abandoned that
mhm.
and kind of like turned away and never looked back. So he kind of like at the very least forgot about it, and Truffaut never did. Truffaut kind of stuck with it. And there was something like Truffaut did become a little more streamlined over time. I wouldn't say he ever became like fully mainstream. There was always that flourish there that like, you know,
Yeah.
the 400 blows flourishes are always there in Truffaut, but he became a lot more, direct and focused. He didn't do some of the, Jules and Jim shit anymore, where it's
No.
like, It's a little more drastic, but it kind of culminates in the last Metro, which is very straightforward. But he
I
always
do
had that
think
attitude.
the last Metro is a pretty beautiful film still.
Oh,
Like
I love it. No,
I
this
think
is.
Truffaut is great
Oh,
all
me
the way
too.
through. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah, not to be misunderstood. I love Truffaut. He was like one of the first like quote unquote
But I
auteurs
don't
I
know if
felt like.
that should be viewed as becoming more mainstream or just maturity, you
Uh,
know?
it's interesting to me because like and I'm probably gonna keep bringing up the Godard thing, but it's just because it was such a central point of the discourse surrounding this movie is that
It's
Godard
fine.
fucking
I'm sure we'll
hated it.
have a whole
Yeah,
thing about it. I'm just trying to resist.
no, I'm saying like for Godard, like he felt like Truffaut was like regressing
Yeah.
almost, which is curious because, and I think a part of that is because he's like, come on, you're better than this, but also because like not because he actually like disrespected him as an artist. I think he respected him very much, which is why he was so angry about it. But um, I think it's interesting that for Truffaut was like, no, I'm becoming better, you know. And I do think there is something of like a childishness to the French New Wave. So I say this as someone who's like kind of grown out of the French New Wave, and I mean like the specifically like 60 to 65 years.
Yeah.
Like I'm still very into Truffaut and like Godard, but mostly like what they did after those initial few years, because there's kind of a childishness to that era, and that they were just doing shit because they could, and then which makes sense because they wanted to resist what French movies were doing at the time. And now they were like actually being more considerate about what they were doing,
Yeah.
which is, I think, what makes a movie like this very interesting is that Truffaut is no longer just doing shit just because he's not to undersell the 400 Blows of Jules and Jim. I think those are beautiful films, but you know what I mean? Like he's
Oh
not,
yeah. Yeah.
it seems less indulgent. Although on another level, this might be the most indulgent movie he ever made. So maybe I'm wrong, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we're on the Godard topic, we can bring up Godard's criticisms of Day for Night.
they're
Basically
very
calling it,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and essentially calling it a complete like lie, like
Yeah.
a most insincere thing. That the criticism that probably stings the most was how Godard felt that Truffaut, who plays the director in the film Day for Night, like sanitized himself by making himself like almost into like a priestly figure that like doesn't
Yeah.
have any time for women, and it's just his mistress's film, which was
Yeah,
not the
I
way
did note
Truffaut
that.
was.
I did note that he's like borderline asexual in this movie, which is funny because the movie is directed by him and it's full of
Yeah.
sex scenes. And I saw, I forget who did it, but I saw like an essay on this movie and they pointed out that I think they make a point of showing that he's not wearing like a wedding ring or anything. Like he's very asexual in this movie, which is
and
fascinating.
and which Truffaut as a person was
It's
not.
not, no.
Not.
I
But
think
also
he,
Godard is living in a fucking glass house when he says that, and shouldn't
yeah,
throw stones inside of it. Um, but I feel like Godard is just missing the fucking like. I don't know how you can miss the point when like it's to me this is a defense of cinema, and you're not
yeah,
going to like a defense of a lie. So you're not going to tell the truth in defense of a lie. You're gonna tell the best kind of lies that you can that feel substantial and feel significant or sentimental. And there's dignity to the film, but not every moment is dignified. Like there
yeah,
is something here.
yeah.
Um, it has one of the hardest scenes I've ever seen Truffaut direct, especially when dealing with age and like withering beauty. When Severine is
Yeah,
trying
the
to do her
actress.
scene and she keeps going in the wrong door and like she keeps messing up at the same exact part, and she has like a breakdown about it, and you get some side context from the script girls and stuff being like, well, yeah, but her son has leukemia, like he's going to die any day, like there's all of this. And
Mhm.
I've read essays from Truffaut like about how sympathetic he was to the concept of the aging starlet, or the aging muse. And
Yeah, it is interesting because like he did that a lot. Like even in Jules and Jim, I think Catherine is supposed to be like 18, and she's played by like Jean
yeah,
Moreau, who might have been, I don't know how old she might have been, 3, but like she filmed that movie after La Notte, in which
yeah,
she looks like she is ready to die in La Notte, and then in Jules and Jim, she looks like she's like 20. It's wild.
I just the Day for Night is like wild to me because so many scenes like directly are about like not about but take two like that scene I just mentioned is both dignified and completely undignified. Like the film itself
Yeah.
is a lie and it's also truthful. Like everything about it is a contradiction, but not a contradiction of self. It's so weird. Uh,
Mhm.
oh man, I kind of love this movie, but it's just
I do. I can at least like I am also sympathetic to the movie and its intentions. I can sympathize with Godard on this though because like I realized that at that point in his life he was like very disillusioned and angry and upset and he felt like he was getting nothing done where he
but,
was.
but
And
Godard
so
was
like
also in that letter wrote like, well, since you made such a shit movie, why don't you
yeah,
give me money to make a real movie or
yeah,
something?
exactly, which is like so cruel. And that's also where Truffaut said, "God, you've been a shit." Um,
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think he
famously.
also says something to the effect of, if you know you're gonna hate it, why do you even bother going to see it? Um, which is curious. Although I suppose to that he could say because other people, because the masses are, but whatever that means. But yeah, it's there's a lot of vitriol in that letter.
There is.
And I mean, it makes sense. They both, I think, had the same concerns, but just kind of confronted them in different ways. That's okay. Yeah, they, day for night.
Yeah,
Yeah, they confronted it in different ways, and you know,
it just like it
obviously
also
both persist. I think it's also just because everyone is a nihilist now and kind of deliberately mis. I think they maybe take the sincerity a little too at face value, which is, in all fairness, an easy mistake to make with Truffaut, given his overwhelming sincerity.
yeah.
I do think he is more confrontational than people give him credit for, but I understand
I
the
do too, and he's
inclination.
saying some
Yeah,
pretty fascinating fucking things about filmmaking, or maybe just about like creation in general, that plays off the day for night idea of, what's going on is a comical farce,
yeah,
and that is filtered into a tragedy, like on camera. Like the film they're making is a tragedy, but everything around it is an actual farce, and somehow that's filtered into that. And I mean, you
yeah,
can't help but think of certain situations like I know you write very well, and I make YouTube videos sometimes well, but there's always that thing of like filtering your emotions into something, right? Like,
yeah. I
and
was,
what's like more important, the actual creation of the thing or the thing itself? Because Truffaut doesn't seem like he seems invested in the concept of filmmaking, but not in the film that he's making in Day for Night. Like, so I don't like, is it
yeah,
creation?
yeah, he cares more about the process than what they're actually doing because it seems like very undetailed what they're doing, or at least you don't get like the full meat of the project from just the
No.
production process. It doesn't come across whatever he would do with it.
And what they're actually making,
Wait,
and this is where he gets sentimental, and what I needed to be reminded of about film and about like communities around it, what they're making is a temporary family that dissolves after 3 weeks or whatever. That's
yeah,
literally what they're making.
yeah.
Complete with like, like the drunk aunt and like the rambunctious little kids running, like
I
every archetype would be there.
That's why I think a lot of people probably take issue with the whole family aspect to it because it comes off like Truffaut is saying, yeah, working together as a family, and to which someone could say, no, you're their fucking boss, and they're working for you, and
But
there's power
curiously
dynamics.
enough,
But yeah, no, I agree. I think he kind of like undersells that because he does kind of make a point of showing how hollow their relationships actually are. It's kind of like a very superficial family.
I think it goes to what you were saying. Like Truffaut is um, kind of confrontational, or he's at least in on the criticism of it, because every part of the crew, like they're in on the idea of I'm not gonna see you again. Maybe like bye, we're done. This is
Yeah,
just
they
for everything.
It's all about the
But like during
business
this
for them.
temporary thing, we'll plan to get married, we'll plan to elope and do all these
Yeah,
wild things. But like the second
yeah.
it's done, oh no, I'm going to fucking Japan or something like by
Yeah, he
myself.
quits movies. Jean-Pierre quits movies. I'm done with movies, and then he's like, I'm going to Japan for a movie. Like literally like 12 hours later, he's
But on the idea that that's where people take issue with like, no, you're their fucking boss. I did see like one comparison video of they compared Contempt, another film about filmmaking, but by Godard, to Day for Night. And one of the interesting things they brought up in there is that Contempt is like hyper focused on the quote unquote important people, like the stars and the producers, the writer and the directors, all making
Mhm.
these big decisions. Whereas Day for Night, sure, like Truffaut is their boss, but we see script girls. Like the prop man is one of the most memorable characters. We see PAs running around. We see like the God, what, like the groundskeeper's wife sitting in a chair knitting and judging everyone. Like like
Yeah,
we see the laborers. We see the like everybody coming to like
and
it's
they're largely
sentimental because
women
it has
too. They're
yes,
largely women. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that yeah, it's sentimental, but it doesn't. But to me, and I'd have to agree with Truffaut to a certain extent. I think sentimentality, if it belongs anywhere, probably in cinema. Probably, if we're gonna have
Yeah.
it. Um, and because it's not just Capra. Like, there's more
Yeah.
sentimentalists than just Frank Capra. Like, Truffaut's a
Yeah.
sentimentalist, and we can talk about quite a few things here. I haven't even brought up a Jacqueline Bisset in this movie, who is like stunning and I think really good in this film. I probably my favorite film of hers. She's great in this film, and she's like a hard character to really engage with and really like understand
Hmm.
what's going on.
She's
But there's
the
like
I didn't learn all the actress's name. She's the lead, the one who's
yeah, she
married to the
was Julie
doctor.
Baker, I
Yeah,
believe.
Julie. Okay, yeah.
She was phenomenal here. And there's a lot of complexity to her. And I think through her, you get a different kind of love for film. Like, I
Hmm.
think that, like Truffaut's characterization of himself is that, like, it's a labor of love kind of thing. And yeah, like his mistress is film. But with Jacqueline Bisset, that's where you really get, like, her sanity is film. Like working
Yeah,
keeps her sane. Like, film keeps her sane in an insane world.
I agree. And that kind of just reminded me how it's bizarre, like how much I feel like I'm not sure how much we're supposed to read into Truffaut's character. Um,
No, I don't know.
because the dreams seem to imply that we're supposed to, like the fact that we see his dream sequences seem to imply that we're supposed to read into him. But then every scene outside of those, he is basically a blank slate cipher, which I think is effective
Mhm.
because I would think most people seeing this movie are probably aware of who Truffaut is. And so I think the effect is intended to be that you just ignore him almost because it's like, okay, it's Truffaut, like we'll view things through his perspective, but he is not the protagonist here. It's everyone around him. If anything,
No.
it's Joelle, the character Joelle, who feels like the showrunner here because she's the one. I think she's technically a script girl, but it's unclear if she's
She
like a
is,
first
yeah.
AD or second AD or something. But
She's
she's
like my
yeah,
favorite. She's one of my favorite characters in the
she's
whole
my
TV.
favorite character. I love her. Yeah,
Like played by Natalie Bai. She's
yeah,
amazing in this movie. She's so fun, and
phenomenal.
she is technically a script girl because they had some throwaway line about the screenwriter like wasn't there. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going on, but she was doing everything.
Yeah,
And I
it's
love
fantastic.
like randomly just fucking like the prop man. Like
Yeah, during
she
a
was
stunt
awesome.
scene. Yeah,
And oh man, she had a great delivery with like
yeah,
Jean-Pierre telling her like, I'm gonna quit movies. That's a good idea. Bye. You should do
yeah.
that. Maybe I'll hate you.
She's like, okay, honey, move. Good for you. She like
Jean-Pierre.
does not give a shit. Yeah. She also has the other great line about I'd leave a guy for a movie, but I'd never leave a movie for a guy.
That's it. That's it. And if you know, yeah, that's the thing, right? Oh,
But
because
and it's
that's when we
unclear
get
if
to
she
fade out and get the full dream.
Yeah.
too. Like,
And it's unclear to me if she means that to say like leave a guy for a movie in terms of like to like as a job or like as a, you know, as art, as like if she's saying like I would choose art over a guy or I would choose a job over a guy. It's very unclear what she means, but I
it's
also
unclear to me like how often in this film they're engaging with film as art rather than
I
as
agree.
something that's just not working and they have to make
Well,
it work better.
as someone who has worked on a set, that's always the vibe. No one really gives a shit except the director.
Like I
Which I
love
think
that
part of
the
that is the, you know,
I love trying
non-linearity
to
of
get
shooting.
the kitten to fucking to drink the milk because I mean that is a scene from The Soft Skin that was like
Yeah,
panned by critics with Francis Dorliac I think was in it, and that is a direct scene from it and like like oh, like is there like the artistry of film like I like seeing it like this of
yeah,
like all these profound moments, you know, like the most profound directors like what went into making it was all like mostly a farce or absurd or weird, an insane way to filter to filter something that is just a farce into something that is like elevated or meaningful, but then the
yeah,
farce is meaningful, right?
yeah,
Because it's the creation. It's so cool because they say that movies are more controllable than reality, but it looks like they had a really hard time controlling film, you know.
yeah. They they do keep flip-flopping throughout the movie, but I think kind of deliberately on like how romantic a lens they're willing to view the quote-unquote cinema. Because there's a line, one scene that stood out to me was I forget, it's like in the first half of the movie. It's where Truffaut is talking, I think, to his producer, if I remember correctly. And I don't know the exact line, but they're basically talking about like how the shoot is chaos and the way the scene is framed. It's like he's shooting it like a noir film. Like
Yeah,
they're like he's like we wouldn't have gotten into this game if we knew it'd be easy or something like that. It's like this isn't our first rodeo. It's, you know, it's like they're these jaded, you know, like they've been through hell working on this shit. And there's also the line where they talk about the fire and how people would just stare at the fire.
that's a really cool line. Like
Yeah.
people always need flickering images after eating or something like that.
Yeah, so there's on that level kind of a romantic notion of it, but then there's also
Well,
like a very non-romantic notion when you actually see what they're doing.
there are a lot of layers of complexity that just no one really, um, I don't know, engages with. Like, it's almost like Truffaut sees movies as like an alternate reality where you can make sense of the sentiment or make drama of the farce because I mean he's throughout this film taking lines that Julie is saying like the actual person is saying like life is rotten and like her own analysis of the
Oh
film and
yeah.
writing it
Yeah.
into the dialogue, but
He
it's
literally
in a
does that at
way
the
so that
end.
like the creation itself is documented so that like it's I guess like it's it makes sense of the sentiment in a certain kind of way, and I think that's fascinating. Um, my God,
It's like he's channeling life into the art, but then the way he does it is also on some level kind of sociopathic.
yeah,
Because he's, you know, like tragedies are happening on set and he's just incorporating them into the movie. But then that also grants the movie a greater semblance of life and
yes,
reality. It reminds me, I have a friend who one of my closest friends once recorded me um without my knowing while I was talking on a monologue about some movie or something, and then he was like, yeah, it's because I want to know how people talk so I can write better. And I was like, fair enough, dude. He also, I won't say who this is because, but he also once did this like at a job. He to some like old man he was talking to at his job, and he was like, yeah, well, his the way he's talked was really natural, and I wanted to incorporate that into dialogue. And I thought, bro, that's some psychotic shit, but I also respect it because it's real.
I love how you just said by incorporating those things, like intrusively incorporating those things, and also like you know not being sly about it, like just directly lifting it, not
Yeah,
transforming it at
yeah.
all.
And they know
Like,
too. They're all like, he fucking quoted me while I was talking about how my husband's gonna leave me. I guess that's
yeah,
just how it goes. All right, let's do the fucking scene. Like they all do not give a shit. They are all just
I would say
completely checked out.
it doesn't simply give it more of a semblance of life. It gives it the only semblance of life. Like for
Yeah,
this,
and this fucking machine. Yeah.
I love that when Alexander dies, like immediately he and the script girl are like, okay, we'll use a double, we'll use a stand-in. Can it be in snow? And like it's done. No more mourning.
It's a mystery to solve. Yeah, this guy that they hung out with for weeks is dead, and they're like, well, oh well.
I did think that Truffaut handled sexuality well in this movie, especially with
Yeah,
Alexander.
I know it's always a questionable point with Truffaut, and I get why, because he's like the kind of non-malicious kind of vaguely misogynistic, which it just manifests as I think women are magic, but which comes up throughout all his work. You know, my
But I
favorite
think the
Jules and
point, at least
Gem, which is
with Day for
yeah.
Night, though, everyone's
Although
magic, right?
yeah, they
Either
confront
everyone's
like
magic or
everyone's
no one's magic.
yeah, exactly. So that's how he gets around is he's like kind of confronting his own shtick, which he would do again literally after this movie. He would continue to do it, but he knows what he's doing. It's the it's the game. It's the
Yeah.
game. It makes it feel like he's doing it less for like out of like a personal, fetish thing, and more because he knows it works better for the dramaturgy or whatever, like he thinks it works better for a movie experience and less because he actually believes it, which is funny to think about because I know everyone thinks of Truffaut in that way as the dude who thinks women are literally magic. um
I can sympathize. Jean Moreau is literally magic. So
yeah, especially in that movie. Jules and Jim changed me. Like that movie's
I mean, yeah,
fucking
most
great.
of the women he was like really into like are pretty like Catherine Deneuve and fucking Jacqueline Bisset and Jean Moreau. Yeah, if I was Truffaut, I'd think they were magic too. If those were like
And
my
it's a
actors.
European thing too. Like what's the fucking difference between that and Antonioni's framing of Monica Vitti?
Right.
It's I think the same degree of depth is there. Although I guess you could argue that Truffaut does a lot of like manic women a lot, like Catherine and Jules and Jim, half the women in this movie. But I also think that
Mhm.
undersells when he does the opposite, because in this movie again, like the only thing keeping this movie from not collapsing in on itself is a woman who's running the show, a woman who, by the way,
Yeah.
is like very comfortable in her sexuality. And
What and like her and then Julie's like the extent that she will go to in order to make sure that
yeah,
Alphonse doesn't leave the film.
yeah, because Alphonse is the one who's fucking everything up. Yeah,
Like she would compromise her actual reality for the sake of the fictive one they're trying to create there.
yeah,
Uh, and that's wild to me.
yeah,
Like she sacrificed the most or could have sacrificed the most for this film. Luckily it didn't. Like her husband was
yeah.
understanding, but that was a weird dynamic too, if I can
They
say.
reconcile that rather fast. I agree, but as they reconcile a lot of things in this movie rather fast, but that's more for the energy and momentum purposes,
Hmm.
I think.
Oh, I thought the gay representation was handled nicely too with Alexander. I like that too. He and his young lover.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
because like they
forgot about
build it up
that.
as like this old womanizer of Hollywood, and like everybody got his number. But
Yeah,
fun, cool.
and you also again
Um,
have Truffaut, who cares more about the movies than he cares about women, which
yeah.
is funny again, even more so considering his influences. But
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. Godard was like, "Come on, you didn't make Day for Night because you love movies. You made it because you wanted to try to sleep with Jacqueline Bisset. Like,
yeah,
be honest."
yeah, because like say what you want about Godard, but he's like, man, I'm in love with Anna Karina. What do you want me to say?
Yeah,
He was always very. I want to film this woman's fucking ass for half a movie. What are you gonna do?
I guess that my problem with like like just because you can be completely truthful and cynical and cutting when talking about film doesn't mean like you should, or doesn't mean like that's always the best way to do it.
This is shocking coming from, I'm gonna blame the movies man. That
Well, yeah. Uh, because if I was going to return to the art house, I didn't want to return to a Godard, really, like those kinds of filmmakers who were definitely more confrontational, but also more cynical about the nature of art itself.
yeah,
If I'm going to return to the art house proper, I want to be in the worlds of Truffaut and like people like,
yeah,
Tarkovsky who take it seriously. I want to take it seriously again and not
yeah,
chastise
and
characters for acting overwrought. Like I can't chastise anyone in this film, and they're all sentimental.
yeah, and I mean, in his defense, I think he also has Godard always had a bit of the dreamer in him. He kind of manifested it differently, especially more as he got older. He became more of like a sentimental guy. If you watch movies like Film Socialism, incredibly sentimental movie, but like he never went like this far, mostly because I think he's just too suspicious of the implications of like work and labor, whereas like
Right.
Truffaut sees like the nobility in this, and
And yet Truffaut's
Godard
the one
probably
who
felt like,
shows the labor and the
yeah,
work.
exactly. So Godard probably thought like the labor was too demeaning to those involved to show, or something to that effect. But
Which
which fair,
I would call bullshit a little bit on that.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
gotta
I
be
mean,
fucking fun to be a prop guy. Like that's gotta be
yeah,
kind of cool.
I agree. I agree. As as someone who was not a
And
prop
God,
guy, but
okay, if you're gonna get mad about exploitation, not just of workers, but of like the themes of humanity, then don't be a filmmaker. That's what film is.
yeah, and I've always been like very interested in like the implications of how like cinema is like a bastard exploitation art form, you know. It's very different from like painting or like even literature, and I'm know full well like what publishing industry is like, but even then, like cinema's a beast of its own. It's horrifying. It's a horrible, horrible place, but Truffaut
Yeah.
still kind of loves it, not in spite of that, but almost because of how horrible it is. He kind of loves the
Yeah.
anarchy of it, which so yeah, I respect where Godard is coming from, but I also think that being that dogmatic kind of undersells how interesting Truffaut's perspective actually is, I guess, because and especially because like even I don't think Truffaut could do a movie like this outside of a studio, because I feel like the studio kind of context and implicitly kind of maybe not gives you a pass, but like Scream 2 wouldn't make sense if it wasn't a studio movie. That's the
Yeah.
irony is that like the studio movie is saying studio movies are literally evil and, you know, encouraging people to shoot people. So like it's
Yeah.
noble to make a studio movie about you know, in it makes sense. I understand why Truffaut did it. It makes sense, and I also don't think he believes in a kind of cinema outside that, which makes sense because he was doing this before the internet became a thing. So how would he know? You know, but he worked in a time where it's like you had the pearly gates. If you get through the gates, you're allowed to do it. If you don't get through the gates, it'll never fucking happen. You'll never make a movie. That doesn't happen. So Godard now makes movies about how like everyone can make a movie because everyone has a phone, but Truffaut never saw that. He didn't
Yeah.
know. He didn't know that, you know, everyone was going to have a camera in their pocket at all times. So for him, it was a privileged position that you had to be lucky to get into. So it makes sense to me that he holds that kind
He
of
does have
position.
those quotes, and I'm not gonna word it correctly, but like he said he never really wanted to like change cinema. He wanted to like improve it. Like he wanted to be
Yeah,
part of,
what was
like
happening.
he happened to be in the French New Wave, man. Like he wanted to be a part of the system. Like he wanted
Yeah,
to improve it and make it better because he saw. I mean, this is a guy who learned his morality from the studio system, from people we were talking about earlier, like Hawks and Hitchcock. This is how
yeah.
he understood the world and people around him.
And to
Um,
be fair, like guys like that fucking loved John Ford, and John Ford was
mhm.
defined by being a workhorse, a dude who didn't give a shit, and yet
Yeah,
everyone reads heavily into the artistry of someone who never wanted to be seen as an artist. You know, it's And even the ways in which he was an artist for him are delivered examples of why he wasn't, like the way he would, cut scenes so that it could only be edited a certain way. People were like, the artistry, and he's like, no, it just made sense. Why would I cut it later?
Exactly.
Yeah. So and I think this taps into that energy, Day for Night, that is, like, it taps into that energy of like, this is a machine that you're taking
Yes,
part in, not beauty, you know.
because if you notice, Truffaut, like the director in Day for Night, never really argues with the
No,
producer, the studio heads. They're
no,
like, "You have
it's
to do this in 5 days," and he goes, "5 days? I can never do it." Okay, we will. Like he never
yeah.
argues. He's like totally down with whatever the studio has to tell him. He'll just roll with the punches.
Well, like I said, he's totally, there's no like conflict, antagonism, anything. He is just like practically a non-entity in this movie, which again only makes the dream sequences all the weirder for me. That's like my only like point where I'm like, I see what he's doing. I see why. Is that, he literally dreams of cinema. He steals as a kid the Citizen Kane posters and such. I get it, but it's strange to me also because he wants to like minimize his presence in the movie as much as possible because he cares more about, script girls and prop guys than he cares about the auteur.
But
Um,
those dream sequences are interesting. You just use that analogy of like only can get through the pearly gates and make the
yeah,
film.
yeah,
And of course, the kid is reaching through there with a cane through
yeah.
a gate, like
He's
trying
the
to get through
dreamer.
the thing that he's locked away from.
And who is he stealing from? He's stealing pictures of fucking Orson Welles, which was the
Mm,
kid who got fucking lucky. The
yeah.
guy who got lucky and paid for it. But for a time he got lucky. Which is actually funny. I told you before this, I've been watching the Hopper Wells doc where Dennis Hopper and Orson
Yeah.
Welles are chatting. And it's really funny because they both had basically the same story, which is that they were guys who got lucky with one movie that they shouldn't have been allowed to make and somehow got away with making, got lucky, and then fucking lost it all overnight and got kicked out of Hollywood. But Dennis Hopper has, when they filmed that, he wasn't kicked out yet. He still had like a year before he got kicked out. And so he's saying stuff like throughout the whole movie, like, yeah, I think movies can change the world. I think, I believe in, you don't have to make a political message, that movies can just be an expression of personal values or like your personhood, and then something comes of that. And then Orson Welles, the dude who got kicked out of Hollywood for 30 years and wasn't allowed to finish Othello for a while, was like, you're a fucking idiot. Like, and
Right.
he's like fighting him on it the whole time because Orson's like, yeah, I used to be like that. I'm not anymore. I got sick of it because I got screwed over too many times. But Truffaut didn't get screwed over, so he was able to like maintain that, energy for the rest of his life. Which is
Truffaut's got that.
interesting.
Oh man, some of it's fascinating. Like the first time he has a dream sequence, he's in his head and like he's thinking or he's dreaming about the criticisms he received earlier of like, why don't you make political films? Why don't you make
Yeah,
erotic films?
yes, that's what made me think of it. Yeah.
That's what just set
Which,
it off with me. And but I was like, maybe Truffaut is like admitting like can't I don't think cinema is where you filter politics. I don't think cinema is where you filter eroticism because eroticism and politics are uncontrollable. And if I filter them like Day for Night and show them as a controllable thing, that's more of a lie than sentimentality. Like,
yeah, and I think he also probably thinks that like it's inherently political enough that he doesn't need to,
yeah,
argue anything, because I would argue like 400 Blows is in its own way a political movie. It's, very critical of like the family unit and such. Like, there's no sentimentality in the depiction of the family unit. It's very critical of it, but it's
Last
not
Metro
something he's,
certainly was.
yeah. And so, but I don't think that's something he necessarily set out to do. I think he was just compelled by the concept of the story and let any, ideas stem naturally from that situation, which is probably why he films Day for Night in that way, as someone who is like disinterested in art, because he figures the art will
Yeah,
make itself out of the situation, which is
that's
why
perfect. That's perfect. Yes.
well, I was thinking of this because I was thinking about how like throughout the movie they're making seems utterly uninteresting and rote. But then I also figured if you were to film like the making of the 400 Blows, what do you get? You just get like maybe the movie, if Day for Night was about the filming of the 400 Blows, the scenes would be like kid stands up in the classroom, next scene kid goes to the beach, next scene, like kid comes
Yeah.
home for dinner. it doesn't seem in the fractions like compelling art. It's the way he put them together and chopped them up and screwed them up. I guess suppose Jules and Jim would probably come off more chaotic because any given scene is like, yeah, I'm gonna shoot you and then I'm gonna fuck you. But like 400 blows, like that would be much or shoot the piano player maybe, like because you'd have a
Well,
scene where it's like a guy is in bed with girl.
Truffaut was actually asked about that. Like, why is Meet Pamela? Why does it seem like such a bad movie that they're making? And he's like, I based Meet Pamela off of The Soft Skin, my own movie that I thought was really good. like he made that kind of movie. like, but I think oh my God, it's so fascinating because you see how anything is made, and it makes what they're making seem like disingenuous because it's facile, because it's artificial. God, if they did like a behind the like how was Andrei Rublev made, you'd be like, well, this makes me think less of the film.
Well,
Just a bunch of dudes sitting around eating like craft service.
I think it's also has to do with how much of cinema, particularly great cinema, is pulled from like really fucking uninteresting sources. Like I know everyone makes a point of talking about, for like a more contemporary example, like how David Fincher just takes like airport novels and turns them into like best picture winners, just because like regardless of your opinion of David Fincher, like the idea is that he's taking like really facile material and making something interesting out of it. And I know like these guys, like the French New Wave directors, you know who they fucking loved? Western directors. You know who Godard loves? Like fucking Clint Eastwood. Guys who took just the same framework every time. Half of John Ford's movies on the surface appear to be the exact same movie, but when you actually watch them, there's something more is brought out. On paper, The Searchers doesn't seem interesting, but then when you actually watch it, you're like, man, this is like one of the most evil anti-movie movies ever made. And that's not intentional, or intentional in terms of like the source, but like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it probably doesn't seem interesting when you're filming it, but then when it's done, it would probably be fucking amazing. I'd watch whatever this movie is they're making in its final form. It looks terrible now, but I'm sure in the final version, he cuts it like a motherfucker. I'm sure it's
I don't know.
Apocalypse Now in the final version.
Right? The Batman in the final version.
Yeah, like he plays the Doors while like this part where Jean-Pierre like he comes out to shoot the father, and like it's playing like fucking jazz music and cutting to pictures of his wife's face the whole time. I'm sure it was cool. I'm sure the final version cool. Like I'm sure all those long takes they're doing in the final version, I'm sure are not long takes in the final version. I'm sure he cuts away from them. Like
something about the film, something you said earlier that like made me think about it, because like I love Jules and Jim, 400 Blows, Shoot the Piano Players. No, I think they're great, but I can see where like an accusation of sentimentality would carry more weight there, because he's also naive there. Like Truffaut is naive, but there's something to be said about the sentimentalist who doesn't lose the sentimentality. Like this is maturity. Like we're seeing the same kind of sentimentalism, but like an earned kind. Like it's from someone who's been making movies for the last like 15-ish years, has been in the system and still loves it like he did before he was even making them.
Yeah, that's what's so fascinating about him, like endlessly, is that he somehow was not turned off by all that.
Yeah.
To the very fucking end. Like he died going to see a movie. Like he never lost that. And I mean, I guess others don't. Like I would argue, like Godard never lost that. Godard is probably more ecstatic about cinema than he ever has been in his life. And yeah, but like he had to evolve to do that. He had to like change himself and change his views and change what he wanted to do in order to like force himself to keep going. Right. Truffaut didn't have to. Truffaut kind of like cohered, maybe his ideology cohered it, but like he never had to like break out of the industry. He never had to change his way of viewing the art form. He kind of preserved that from like childhood to adulthood, and to his death he never changed. He stayed exactly the same. It's fascinating.
So what is truly being filtered through Truffaut's film is always a love of cinema. So he's always just the day for night. But
which
I think what you're saying is fascinating there.
Which like fair enough, like I'm suspicious of movies too, but like I can admire it when I see it, you know.
Hmm. Well, that's the thing, right? And feel free to disagree. When I watch a Godard film, if he does love cinema, I'm not. That's not communicated to me. What's communicated to me through Godard is almost a send up of the machinations of composition rather than a celebration of it. But with
Hmm.
Truffaut, when I'm watching a Truffaut film, and why I needed to watch Day for Night in particular, like I knew I needed to watch it because I only kind of liked it when I first saw it, like 10,
Same,
12 years ago. But I knew
same.
that that's the movie. If I'm going to get back into like loving movies, no one who could better write a love letter that I would find intriguing than Truffaut, than Day for Night. Like I knew that
Hmm.
that was the one because it's effortlessly communicated, even though like it is romanticized, but it's also like pretty anti-romantic at the same time. Like some
Yeah.
things matter, something it's just whatever. It's just a farce, and yet the love I can feel it like effortlessly, and
I
I
will
don't think it's a lie.
I will say, maybe this is just me, but I feel like people tend to compare Truffaut to like Spielberg. But I would argue the difference there is that Spielberg is literally one of the most psychotic human beings who has ever lived. And
Yeah,
I don't mean just cinema. I mean that man is a psychopath. Granted, one I'm fascinated by. I have like a morbid fascination with the man who was like, I'm gonna make a Holocaust movie for the masses. Like horrifying man, but like in an interesting way. Like he really the difference between Spielberg and Truffaut is that like Spielberg like really buys into it. Buys into like first of all, he's on a bigger scale because he's like a fucking rich man. He's incredibly rich. But
mhm.
like he I don't know, he like buys into more I don't know how to word it. Like he really believes in it at face value, whereas like Truffaut believes in more of like what the art provokes, whereas like Spielberg's more interesting in like the machine, like
Yes,
the you know the movements. He thinks it's perfectly reasonable to make a movie with you know all of his movies have like you know there's suspense scenes, there's comedy scenes, there's romance. It just there's the difference between this is a movie about an alien, this is a movie about the Holocaust, this is a
yeah,
movie about the you know Munich. It's all the same. It's just movies. Whereas like Truffaut never goes that far. Truffaut never tries to like, you know, I don't want to say he stays in his lane, but like he never tries to, you know, move beyond what he knows. He never presumes that like film is that apolitical that he can just make a you know a sweeping romance out of anything he wants. He never went that far. And the one
no,
time he does like incorporate, you know, obviously the Holocaust into movies, it was The Last Metro, which is way more sober than Schindler's List and a lot more interesting, in my opinion. I
it
love
is.
The Last Metro. So
Well, Last
I don't know if
Metro is
that makes
phenomenal.
sense, but like I think they're very different filmmakers, despite both, you know, being criticized for being sentimental. I think like Truffaut is romantic in his worldview, whereas like Spielberg is like a sociopath. And I think like they're both interesting, but like Spielberg is more like unintentionally interesting.
Well, yeah, Last Metro has some of that Day for Night, like symbolic carryover. Like that's Catherine Deneuve and having to filter like Nazi occupation into a stage production. Like
Yeah.
it's still there. It's and I guess the stakes are just a lot higher in the Last Metro. It's a really beautiful film, but the Spielberg and Truffaut comparison, like I can understand it, but I think it's like a I don't think it's a very charitable like
Yeah.
contrast. I mean, they're both sentimentalists. You can accuse Truffaut of I guess sanitizing filmmaking, but it doesn't seem too sanitized to me.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I think. And I which is interesting because that's like the most common criticism of this movie, I think.
it's
I mean,
from
that's because
people who
most
like
people don't
want it to
read
be
Godard's
something
letters.
other than it is. Like people want Day for Night to be contempt, want it to like have some kind of snide, snarky statement about art. It wants it to be 8.5 or contempt, and it's like it's not that fucking movie. It's
Oh,
Truffaut's a completely different guy.
I'd argue it's kind of similar to 8.5, although I always I always struggle to get through 8.5. Actually, it's my least favorite Fellini. But I not my least favorite, but no, I do think they're kind of similar in that
But
like
most
yeah
modern art house fans, if they see a dream sequence, they want it to be like Fellini-esque, like flying in
yeah
the air, like tied
oh
by like a kite, not a kid stealing Orson Welles stills in a very sweet way.
yeah. And that's the other thing
Like,
is that like Spielberg is an industry director through and through, whereas Truffaut is ostensibly still art house. You know, he
if I
never.
could be like honest, probably if Truffaut wasn't in Close Encounters, I'm not sure how prevalent this comparison would actually be.
Yeah.
Um, Spielberg is Capra, and like that's fine to me.
Mhm.
That's fine. Truffaut is only in that is only in that grouping because he is a sentimentalist. But like sentimentality on film, I think Truffaut is saying is like probably inescapable, but also there's a virtue in it because life is fucking sentimental and life is farcical, and you have to filter these things probably.
This
Oh,
is a, this is why when you originally made your Scream 2, I'm gonna blame the movies thing, I was like, I mean, I agree, but I also think you have to, I always word it. I say like
well,
I
there.
think you have to like brave the flames, the purgatorial flames of this evil art and find something valuable in it. Maybe it is an exploitive art, but like, okay, still
Yes,
gonna
yes,
watch
it's
it.
just
Like there's something there. I don't think it's
it's
entirely meaninless.
it's
Like
easy to forget when every good argument, the people who made them are dead, long dead. Like it's easy
yeah,
to forget that there have been a lot more films about how films are bad for you than about how films are good for you. At least ones that are good movies.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And the ones that are usually about how they're good are usually more not confrontational, but like, movies like Film Socialism, which is, a deeply moving movie, but also like a deeply political one, a very experimental movie, not one that many people are liable to watch because it's 40 minutes of people on a boat talking about treasure and with incomplete subtitles. So, on purpose. Whereas like Truffaut was like, no, this is a movie people will actually see in theaters, most people. It's the Straub issue. It's the Straub issue, which is, sure, Straub and Huye are making important cinema, but who's gonna see it?
yeah,
You know?
I just
Which
I'm over the I'm gonna blame the movies arc. The Cape Side arc is done. We're done with postmodernism. We're
yeah, no, I agree. That was my main criticism when I first saw that, which is that like I feel like you have to, I'm more bothered when people are just kind of implicitly like the people in like cinephilia that will watch like 10 movies a week and then complain constantly about how much they hate movies. I'm like, clearly you have some link
yeah.
here. Clearly you're not,
Just
you know,
I needed Day
can't
for
be,
Night. I needed
yeah,
this film to like remind me of what is so valuable intrinsically about film.
yeah, I agree.
Because it's really easy to forget, especially when you're only engaging with the most cynical pre-Columbine '90s movies ever made. Like
Yeah.
it's really easy to forget that like film is important and valuable. So I knew getting back into it, Truffaut was the only one who could make that make me fall in love with film as a valuable thing again. I guess Truffaut's cool.
Truffaut is cool. Rest in peace.
I mean, yes, rest in peace. But
We should have done the J thing where every time we said Truffaut's name, we say rest in peace.
God, you're referencing the new Nightmare video, and I wonder how many people watch it and then like are like confused for two reasons why Justin keeps saying rest in peace every time he says Wes Craven's name, and then also why I'm laughing every time. every time they say "rest in peace" because it looks
and
really confusing.
and why Justin and I have like a 45-minute argument about whether it's a Catholic film. But I mean, it's actually a good comparison point. You know, another movie with a self-insert director. And I called that movie a narcissistic movie. And
Hey,
to
we actually haven't
clarify,
called this narcissistic.
well, I was gonna say, to clarify to any who care, to the 4 people who care, that wasn't me knocking New Nightmare. I was saying that endearingly, is that I think it's narcissistic in the sense that he's just making a movie about himself. And I'm like, hey man, fair game. I have no issue with that. Wes was a humble dude. But yeah, I do think there is something like vaguely narcissistic about this movie, but not in a bad way. I'm not saying it's like a bad thing. I'm just more in the sense that he's maybe making the job he has seem more romantic than it is, in the same way that, say, I compared it to a noir movie earlier, and you can maybe say the same of like noirs that kind of romanticize the job of, like, a cop or detective, which is often much less exciting than movies make it seem. And this guy who's an actual working film director is maybe trying hard to make it look like his job is more exciting than it might actually be. And he does that by setting the entire movie only during production, not during pre-production and post-production, which are both very protracted, laborious processes. But he's making it seem like he's this, hotshot who's seen a lot of shit, and now he's, jaded and tired, but he knows this
They even
town,
have,
and
he wears
he's
the
like,
hearing aid because he got artillery fire in the war, right?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, they make fun of it, yeah.
but Day for Night, I think at the core of Truffaut's character there, it's well, quite literally a dream come true. The kid who was wishing
Wanted
to
to be
be
a
a
director,
director became a
yeah.
director. But is is it really that, like, it is sentimental, but is wish fulfillment artificial when it actually was fulfilled? Like,
Yeah,
real.
it's I remember an interview with John Carpenter where they asked him about like regrets, movies he want, because he always wanted to make a Western and never has, and stuff like that. And they asked him about like regrets, and he's like, bro, I don't care. I wanted to make movies as a kid. I did it. My career
Yeah.
died, but like I did it. I mean, like, quite a lot of movies. So like I'm good. You
I
know.
think Truffaut always considered himself to be the luckiest person
Oh,
on the planet by
absolutely.
virtue of just
Absolutely.
being on set as a director.
Absolutely. He got to play the game he wanted to play for as long as he could, and he up till he died, just like
Mhm.
it's the Eastwood thing. He wanted to die making movies. Well, he did.
And
If he
that
didn't, he
feeling,
would have been
like,
like Eastwood. He would have been 90 years
yeah,
old and still doing it. He wouldn't have retired.
and that feeling, like, it's transmitted by the movie. Like, you're watching it and you're feeling, I don't know, it's good. It's a fucking good movie. I don't know. What else are we gonna say about it now?
Um, I like the how the non-linearity of shooting, because you're not supposed to shoot, like, obviously a movie linearly unless you're fucking Nicholas Winding Refn and they give you a blank check. They because he does that every time he shoots linearly for some reason.
I actually
He did
didn't know that.
he did that for his TV show. He like he did for his TV show. He shot linearly, episode by episode. They had to keep going back to location. Anyway, Day for Night. Yeah, I like how he sets it up in a very specific way so that the what they're shooting at a given time kind of corresponds emotionally to what's happening behind the scenes in the story. Like the point at which everything is going fucking wrong is when they shoot the car crash and shit like
Yeah,
that. Or they shoot, or at the point where like these two characters, Jean-Pierre and what's her name? I keep forgetting. Bisset.
Julie.
Bisset. Yeah, yeah. Julie and Jean-Pierre's character. They have to confront each other, you know, and so
Yeah,
they do it amiably in the form of like shooting their scene together. and they do it like professionals instead of like children, you know, or at least on Jean-Pierre's end, he doesn't act like a fucking child for once. He actually just does his job and he does it right. You know, it always corresponds to what's happening. They introduce the movie by showing
Yeah.
like a scene that involves a great deal of effort on the part of everyone involved, because not every scene requires everyone, but this one did. So it kind of puts that in your mind that you're, you know,
Yeah.
watching a movie that's about everyone that puts it together. So it makes sense. There's a cohesiveness to that I think works.
Either everyone's magic or nobody.
Yeah, exactly. It's a
Everyone's
good line.
valuable. Everyone
I
is
like
valuable in Day for Night, from the stunt man to Jacqueline Bisset. Everyone's incredibly valuable,
the prop guy is the guy that gives an interview at the end
and he's so
about,
good at it.
yeah,
He's the only guy who will do an interview.
They get the prop guy and he's like, we worked hard.
The rest,
Nothing went wrong.
they ask Truffaut for the interview, and he's like, "Oh no, it's too sad." I'm like, "You don't think it's sad though? You just don't want to do an interview. That's so weird."
Yeah, it's fun.
But Jean-Pierre this is a pretty, like, this is a comedy, really. Like, there is a lot of
oh,
funny shit.
absolutely.
Jean-Pierre is hilarious here when, like, when the intern script girl who he is going to marry, like, leaves him for the American stuntman, and he, like, wanders out of his room and there's like a beat and he goes, "May I have money for a whorehouse?" It's fucking hilarious, dude. Jean-Pierre was so funny when they finally find him at like just driving go-karts, and like he does this weird little like his
it's funny
glares.
because he's supposed to be playing like a facsimile of himself for the movie. So he's playing himself in the movie, essentially. It's so funny.
Oh my god. There is some funny shit here, and I think
No,
that the main script girl is like spot on every time.
oh,
Like,
I
really
love
funny
her.
to
She's
have.
my favorite actor. Although Jean-Pierre is great.
He
Jean-Pierre is
is.
always fantastic at playing people that are clueless. My favorite is Le Chinoise, where he's the funniest fucking character in that movie, and he's the funniest fucking character in this movie. No, she's amazing. Natalie Bay, or Bay, whatever, however you say it. She's fantastic. She feels like you know, the most under control character in this fucking movie.
Yeah.
Outside of Truffaut, but that's just kind of by design. She's interesting, and I again, like, I think rightfully people criticize the way Truffaut depicts women, if only because it's like vaguely antiquated, at worst antiquated. I don't think he's ever malicious. I don't think anyone could accuse him of being, you know, like a violent misogynist, but just kind of like vaguely antiquated, you know, old fashioned at worst. But like, she's pretty progressive of a character as far as how
Yeah,
she's
I thought that
depicted.
this movie didn't. It's weird. I think that people like to say that this movie has all of the same criticisms from every other Truffaut movie, but I feel like he meets those criticisms and does something different with them.
Like, fair enough. You're entering a Truffaut movie, and you know, one of the early scenes is a woman keeps like fucking up her lines, and everyone has to work
But
together
that's
to
one
help
of the
her.
most touching scenes. That's like in the movie.
Exactly. You see, like, on the surface, very superficially, the, you know, the French 60s movies tropes about women, and he does play into them, but then also kind of doesn't. He
She
definitely
does make
challenges
me
them.
laugh though there when she's like, "Can I just do what I do on Federico films and just
Yeah,
go
yeah,
like un, deux, trois, quatre? Like, does this count?" I'm like, no, we're
right.
actually recording real sound here. So you're doing great, but like, we have to do the.
Yeah. I love that scene.
You want to talk about confrontational? That's sentimentally confrontation. It's hard. It's a hard scene to, but there's a pathos to it because everyone involved is like, no one's. Someone chastises her once, and then like the context is brought up about how she's like dealing with the loss of a son, like a impending loss of a son.
Yeah.
And no one berates her, is upset with Alexander sitting at the table, doesn't have any lines in the scene really, and just goes, "Those two doors do look exactly alike." So I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that, like, for a movie where like no one seems to really care about each other in any like meaningful sense, they're also not hostile to each other. There's
Yeah.
no like real antagonism between people in this movie.
Yeah. Even like when they should be more hostile to Jean-Pierre, they have to babysit him. They have to coddle him.
Yeah, it reminds me of a conversation I had with Jay about the like the difference between like an Avengers movie and like a Justice League movie, where one they fight all the time for conflict and the other one they just love and support each other unconditionally. And Day for Night is just like weirdly in the middle, because it's like they don't hate each other, they're just doing their job and they don't really care about each other, but they're, you know, they're not
But
out to
during that
kill each
time
other.
period, though, during that time period, they'll make plans to elope and fucking run away, and like the
Yeah.
most intense feelings ever, because they are actually. It reminds me of that Alexander monologue when he's going to meet his lover at the airport. He's like, I guess that they say handshakes were invented to show that someone was unarmed, but actors, like, we need more than that. Like, we need the kiss. Like, we need to be told that we're important, and that like and that we need to know
Yeah.
that we're loved everywhere, because every time we meet someone we're wondering, do they love me? And we
Hmm.
don't know unless they kiss us. So like everything's just intensified. Or
Yeah.
how about we also have to talk about when the woman, like the guy's wife, who's there all the time because she thinks that like everyone's gonna try to fuck her husband, like when she admonishes everybody, when she's like, what
Yeah,
is
she's like, you're
wrong
all,
with you people?
it's it's like when in sitcoms they introduce a character who's like outside of the plot, who enters and is like, you realize this shit is fucking insane, right? Like you guys know each other and hang out all the time and trade off fucking each other and just act like everything's normal. It's fucking insane.
it,
It's
it, it reminds me of like, because like it's a thing where like outsiders wouldn't understand, was that is normal in film land. It
yeah.
reminds me of like I forgot who did a documentary, but it was about like the porn industry, and like you can see like there's like a little family unit thing, and then when they
Oh, are you talking
interacted
about
with
Boogie
the
Nights?
no, it was a documentary.
Oh, because like that does happen in Boogie Nights, is that they form like a family unit, but
Well, I'll use Boogie Nights then, since I remember that better, and this happens there. Remember when they interact with the real world, like outside, and they're reminded that like what they're doing is considered taboo or weird or like amoral as fuck?
how she's like a mother figure to this dude
Yes.
whose dick she's sucking. Yeah,
And like
it's
they're
really,
reminded of that. I don't know.
yeah,
It's not done to that dramatic extent in Day for Night,
of
because
course.
it's just
Truffaut's
okay.
not that adventurous for all his, you know,
No,
the
because
most
I mean it's
adventurous he
still a
ever got
farce.
was the most adventurous Truffaut ever got was getting a woman topless in one scene of Shoot the Piano Player, and just for a throwaway joke, which
I just
was one
love
of my
that like
favorite jokes in Truffaut. But
it shows that to be a filmmaker, to create like the fictive world, you kind of have to hate everything that the real world can give you. Like my actor died, that's terrible because he's supposed to do a scene. Or this woman is pregnant, that's terrible because she's supposed to be here in 3 weeks and we're all going to see that she's pregnant. Like
mhm, yeah,
it's like you can't mourn for the death and you can't like celebrate the baby. They figure out a way to celebrate the baby, but at first Truffaut is just so like just let down. So
yeah,
that like so there are confrontational parts here where Truffaut must know like how his character is coming off. Like Truffaut must know like it's a darkly comic how his character and everyone on the crew responds to Alexander's death, which is like, oh, this is sad, but more so this sucks for the movie than
yeah.
anything else. And like Truffaut must see that
I agree.
and like champion it, like champion that attitude, because it's the ethos of this group of this small family that existed for like 3 weeks and then disappeared, right?
Yeah, it's rough.
I don't know.
It's,
I really love this movie. You were saying before we were filming, like you're giving me whiplash here. I think
yeah,
everyone
yeah.
watching it is getting whiplash too. No, they're not ready for Truffaut. Well, even the art house fans are. I don't know. Like I think they go in
He's
waves, because when I first got into film, like Truffaut, like when I was 14, Truffaut was a big name, and like Truffaut was still really respected. I think he's still respected, but no one really wants to engage with Truffaut,
he's
and
too
it's weird.
mainstream for the art house, and he's too art house for the mainstream. So he's just,
Exactly.
I don't know. Like I I got into him at the at a fortuitous time, because I got into him when I was like first exploring quote unquote world cinema. You know,
Yeah,
like I was
same.
getting into like Kurosawa, Mizoguchi, so on and so forth. Because they had Criterion on Hulu at the time.
I
And
remember that.
I
It was
just
a
came
good
across
day.
Jules and Jim by chance. I watched it on like on my laptop actually at the time, and it was like one of the most religious experiences I ever had because I was like 18,
Yeah,
and I thought, "Oh my God, this is amazing." Because up until that point, all I knew was, 12 Angry Men and The Shawshank Redemption. And so all of a sudden I see Jules and Jim. I'm like, what the fuck is he doing with the camera, man? This is crazy. And like, sure, later I watch other movies. I'm like, all right, sure, Truffaut seems a little quaint by comparison. But like at the time, bro, he fucked my head up. I was
no,
like, oh
yeah,
my God. And I've watched that movie like a million times. I love it. And I guess that's why it's like I'm like on one level I've kind of grown out of Truffaut, but then at the same time, every time I watch Truffaut again, I like feel the same things again. Like I thought I was over him a couple of years ago, and then I saw a theater near me was playing The Bride Wore Black, and so I just decided to go see The Bride Wore Black in theaters, like a print of it, and I loved watching it. Not a perfect movie, but I loved watching it. I actually
yeah.
also saw Fahrenheit 451 in a theater. Um, and I love that too. And like as soon as it's over, I'm like, man, I love Truffaut, and then I forget about him for like a year, and then I
Right.
watch him again, and I feel it again, and it comes and goes in waves. I can't quite escape that dude.
Well, it's weird. I would say that Truffaut is like a dying breed. I think that you can like kind of replace his little monologue and or voiceover in Day for Night of like with the death of Truffaut was like probably the death of a certain kind of filmmaking. I think that every generation has just rejected like this kind of style,
Mm-hmm.
this kind of philosophy, just rejected it more and more and more till like we would
Mm-hmm.
get to the 90s where that this would be seen as more than antiquated, be seen as like a silent movie would be more modern than Day for
Well,
Night would feel.
I think part of it is that all the people like him have either died or like there's not a place for them in the industry.
That's
Like the
right. Yeah.
industry. Funny enough, I think I've already mentioned him a few times, but like the one person that doesn't fit that mold is like Eastwood, and they only let him do it because he's like 90 fucking years old, and he has name brand,
Yeah.
and so like I saw his new movie, and his new movie is like a fucking Truffaut movie through and through. It's like a very sentimental movie that
Good.
just takes pleasure more than the story, just in like the simple movements. He doesn't like care about how the scenes stitch together. He cares about like the idea of a moment where like a guy dances with a woman and it's beautiful. He doesn't care if he has to work to get there. He just loves the idea of that. So like he's allowed to do that. But that's because he's fucking Clint Eastwood. No one else does. There's no like 25-year-olds. All the 25-year-olds getting into movies are, you know,
Fucking shithead.
machine fetishists who like love
Yes.
to do like one takes, and sure they do one takes in like this, but like you know what I mean, like they like the idea of like the machine more than the the romantic side of it,
And that's a
which is I
crying
think a common.
shame. That is such a crying shame because, I don't blame anybody, especially myself, for being like, like maybe cinema is dead and maybe it deserves to be dead. If
It's
if
because
all
it's
you do
hard.
is if all of your interesting output is nihilistic and cynical, then yeah, you're going to have a nihilistic and cynical audience and generations of filmmakers. I think Day for Night and Truffaut as a whole, I think, is so valuable. Like, imagine fucking movies without him. I would be grasping at straws to think of like good defenses of cinema, of the studio system, even. Like,
Yeah.
you don't find those; they don't exist. I think Truffaut is intensely valuable, and I think Day for Night is like, I think it's, I love the movie. I just wish, not that like there are the rejections are really good, like they're really good, like examples of kind of more rebellious cinema. It's just something should be said about its opposite. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. I
But,
was waiting for you to say you wanted me to end it there. That was pretty good.
all right, we have to go to another good moment. Okay, Day for Night's great.
Quick,
Jack
come
thing
up
to
with
say
a
is
Come up
phenomenal.
with like a monologue real quick. Another one.
Come up with another monologue.
No. No,
There
I
is something to
agree.
say though, like I mentioned it earlier, Truffaut, like we could criticize his engagement with women like in his narrative form, but God, like when he casts a woman, he seems to like just like fall in love with her through like filming her. Jacqueline Bisset is no different. Um,
Oh yeah.
he
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like the camera like
yeah,
obsesses.
he's definitely one who believed in the concept of the muse, and he would have
Yeah. Yeah. I've
quite a
never
few
seen
different
like
ones.
idolizing like Jules and Jim.
Yeah,
The most a woman has ever been idolized on camera.
and it
Um,
works. It works.
yeah. I
And yeah, Jacqueline Bisset is wonderful in this film. Truffaut, I just think like it's incredibly important to engage with material like that, especially for me because I got old and bitter and forgot the feeling of just being like, man, you were fucking 15 and like couldn't wait to watch, I don't know, like the Magnificent Ambersons. Like you were 15 and thought Orson Welles was God too, Zach. Like remember this. And like, but why did you like those moments were naive and sentimental, but they weren't untruthful. And Truffaut is just incredible. I'm not gonna get another monologue. I can't. I don't know.
No, that's a good one.
Well, we'll just say thank you for watching the video, and yeah, that's all. Thank you.